Welcome to Castle Defense 101, also known as threat modeling. I am going to ask for a favor here. If you're anything like me, you probably don't want to be involved. You'd rather just sit there quiet and not do anything, just watch what's going on, listen to other people talk. But it would really help if when we go through some of this, we're going to be doing a lot of brainstorming. If you could just yell out some answers, help other people. Because one of the things that's true about brainstorming is when people hear your ideas, it helps spark their ideas, right? So it helps everyone. If you can be a little bit vocal, be a little bit participatory. I am not going to call on anybody. I'm not going to call you out. So you can be completely anonymous and just yell out some answers here. But let's get started, right? This is Castle Defense 101. Take a look at this castle here, right? Not much of a castle. It's made out of wood. It's just one big tower with a fence around it, right? With some sharpened posts. How would you attack it? Start thinking about how would you go through this? How, if you needed to take over this castle, what would you do? What are the risks that this castle has? Go up the stairs. What? Someone else? Light it on fire because it's made out of wood, right? What else? Dig under it, right? There's a lot of different ways you can attack this, right? So there's a lot of different risks that this has. The other thing is it's fairly small. It'd be pretty easy to get all the way around, right? But definitely fire coming up the stairs right in the front. Here's another view of it, okay? You can see right towards the middle, you can see where that is. It's called a motte and bailey, which really just means hill and tower. You can see there's a lot more around it. There's a lot more in the area that's being protected, right? This might change the way you're approaching if you're in charge of taking care of this area, if you're in charge of protecting this area, right? For one thing, it's not just the motte and bailey. It's not just the tower you have to protect, right? There's a village sitting right there, right? There's water nearby, right? How does that change your idea to attack with fire, right? That hill, even if we look at the first picture, that hill is pretty steep. Even though it's not very big, it's pretty steep right there. It's going to be hard to get a running start and try attacking the hill without somebody being able to shoot arrows down on you or throw stuff at you, right? Okay. All of what we're doing here is the first part of threat modeling, right? We're looking at what are the risks involved, how it might get attacked, how it might get misused, how we might protect it, right? And that's all that threat modeling really is. It's trying to weigh some ideas behind it. We'll get more into some actual techniques and stuff towards the end. But just keep looking at it, trying to attack or trying to protect a castle. Here's another one. How would you attack this one, right? What was that? F-16. F-16, yep. It's you come right up on the water. Poison the water, okay. Climb the wall. What's the most successful way of attacking castles in the Middle Ages was what? Does anybody know? From the inside would probably be right up there, but no. Ladders is one possibility, but it's not. The most successful way of beating a castle is siege. Siege. It's just wait it out, right? Surround it, don't let them get supplies, and just make it so that they eventually want to come out on their own. In fact, completely unrelated to threat modeling itself, well maybe, but actual castles, a lot of castles in the back have a small door. Small enough that you can crawl out of or potentially crawl in, but it's easily protected by one person, right? So if you put something that someone needed to crawl out, anybody you had in the castle, you could get them out of the castle if a siege started. There'd be no way for anybody to really come in and launch a successful attack through a small, tiny door, doggy door at the bottom of the back wall. But you could get people out because your biggest liability if the attack is going to be siege would be what? Loss of life would be having lots of people in the castle, right? There's always the thought that, hey, if we got attacked, we bring everybody into the castle walls and keep them safe. No, that's the worst situation for the people trying to defend the castle because you don't want to have to feed all those people. You want to get them out of there, right? Get them away so that you have fewer people to feed, fewer people to take care of. The siege can go on for a lot longer. You can outlast it. All right. So looking at this one, obviously a very different setup. Big walls, right? High walls, it's right near water. Good news, it's right near water. So you have ways to put out fires and stuff if they're right there. It's hard to mass a large body of attackers right next to the walls there because there's not much room. On the other side, it's easy to bring in a lot of weaponry and stuff because you're right near water. They can float it in. A lot of times when we go through ideas like this, somebody will suggest, think like an attacker. And when it comes to threat modeling, we usually say that's considered harmful. Not because it's a bad idea to try to think of different ways it might get attacked, but relying on that, the problem is attackers are a lot cleverer than you think. They're a lot more creative. Unless you are somebody who does attacking, chances are you're not being as creative as they are, right? And you'll focus on the wrong things or things that are obvious to you, but not necessarily the way they're going to use it, right? You get myopic. And so what we'd rather is a way that's a little bit more structured, that kind of gives you the whole picture. And again, towards the end, we'll talk about different patterns that we can use to make sure we're not focusing on something that just because, hey, if I was an attacker, this is what I do, that's what I'm going to focus on. All right. The better way to do this, you had a picture of the castle in your mind, right? I'll stick on that castle for a few minutes. The better way to do this would be to think about all the different points in that castle that could be attacked, right? There's the walls, obviously. Somebody said ladders, right? There's siege just surrounding it. There's poisoning the water supply. There's a bunch of towers, right? Maybe one of those is weak point. Certainly the front gate is going to be one weak point. On the other hand, it's an obvious weak point, so maybe it's more heavily protected, right? That's the type of thing we're going to do when we get into doing this with software, is going through step by step and trying to check all the places. Some of them we may discount right away. Hey, no one's getting through there. Some of them may be more important, right? The front door, we need to make sure that's protected because it's the obvious place, right? Some of it, like someone said, poison the water supply. We need to make sure there's some way of having water already in there in case that happens, right? There's a lot of different possibilities. I'm going to switch the screens here. People can see in the other theaters, if there are any, can actually see a different picture here while we're waiting. But what we're going to do anytime we do these types of threat models is to go through one by one. Where are the places that I think could be attacked? Where are the places that I think, how do I think I could defend those, right? And make sure I've just covered them all just enough to know that I've made some decisions with it. And I think I've tap danced as much as I can with this one picture. Imagine, if you would, all right, you know what? Next picture you guys have probably seen before, so I'll actually talk you through it. How many people here know what Alcatraz Island looks like? Okay, just about everyone, right? What are some of the natural defenses for Alcatraz? San Francisco. The ocean, the bay, the water is very cold. Tides, but there's something more significant about the water? Not rocks, although there are some. Sharks. Sharks is a big deal, right? It's not a very hospitable place to try to get across, okay? Unlike the last couple of castles we looked at, what's significant about Alcatraz? It's made to keep you in, not to keep you out, right? A lot of times what we're going to be doing is not trying just to keep outside attackers out, but keep the things that are supposed to be in. There we go, right? So, if you've ever been to Alcatraz, if you haven't, it's a great trip. It's actually very, very interesting. But one of the things is the fort itself, the prison is up on the top of a hill. It's surrounded by rocks. It's not easy to get up there. It's not an easy climb. San Francisco is cold in the middle of the summer. The water is freezing, full of sharks. Very, very inhospitable. And we're not getting any closer to actually having a picture here, are we? I know. We had it. So close. All right. Let's do some brainstorming here since, again, I got to tap dance until it comes back on. What types of things would you look at protecting, especially for those of you that have been to Alcatraz? What types of things would you look at protecting at Alcatraz? Keep people in. The dock. Turns out that Alcatraz Island, steep walls everywhere, lots of rocks up and down, as someone mentioned. It's not easy to approach, even once you're on the island, to get up to the fortress, up to the fort, because it was originally a fort. What else? What else? Just natural things they put. It's a jail, right? What are the natural things they've put in? Cells, guards, right? It turns out the way to come down the hill is just a windy, twisty road coming down. Plenty of opportunities to defend along it. Those are what we would call mitigations, right? We know there's a chance of people trying to get out. So we put up things to keep them in and to make it harder for them, right? We want to make it as difficult as possible because our goal is to try to protect it, to try to keep people in. So what we're trying to do is come up with these mitigations, different ways to make that difficult so our protections are more effective. Oh, perfect timing. There we go. All right. Let's say we're trying to lock doors, right? Well, maybe what we're trying to do isn't necessarily just locking the doors, it's restricting access, right? We want to keep people from going through. There's a lot of different levels of security we could put into place. Some of them are tougher to enact than others. We could do Cheeto level security, right? Unfortunately, this does represent the state of the art for many companies in security right now, but it fits the need, right? We've kept the door closed. Easy to break through, though. Maybe something a little bit simpler, right? Tried and true, just a master lock on it. Not known to be great security, but it's easy to share access, right? Just hand somebody a copy of the key. They have access. Take it away from them. They don't have access anymore, right? We could be more serious about it, right? If we had a financial institution, maybe we're looking at palm scanners. Maybe we're looking at keypads. Maybe we're looking at a black screen. It is a great security. Oh. The last one is a vault door, a bank vault, right? Obviously, it's the extreme from the Cheeto level security of just having the door keep closed. We could have a huge vault, but vaults have not risks, but they have downsides, right? Opening up the vault, that's not easy. If that's something you got to go in and out of all day long, how are you treating it? You're leaving it open, right? You're not going in, get something out, come out, lock that door, right? It takes some time to open up. That's a feature, but it's also an inconvenience, right? So there's different situations you're going to use these for, and that's what threat modeling is really about, is trying to figure out, when is it worth me putting in that effort? When is it worth me spending that kind of money, that kind of effort, those kind of resources on protecting things? And it's not one answer, right? If it's a bank, vault makes sense, right? If this is your back shed and you already have gates all around you and you're in a gated community and everything, Cheeto might actually work, right? Okay. This is the front gate at Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. And above the entrance, it has the Scottish national motto, Nemo me impune lacessit, which I'm sure I've mangled terribly in Latin. But it means, no one provokes me with impunity. And a lot of responding to threats, a lot of dealing with threats, when you do the threat modeling, it's just making sure it's not worth their effort to attack you, right? Someone who really wants to get in Doesn't matter how big stone castle it is. Doesn't matter that that's a door leading up to, or has a moat before it. It's a bridge. It's easy to protect. There's a gate behind it. There's doors behind that. Someone really wants to get in, they're going to launch the attack. You're going to have to fight it off. But for most people, the Cheeto level door next door down the block is the better choice, right? That's what we're trying to push them to. Make it not worth their while to attack us. So when we do threat modeling, we're really trying to answer a couple questions, ask ourselves and analyze for ourselves. What are we protecting? How important is it? Why are we protecting it? What's the impact of somebody getting it, taking it, looking at it, seeing it? How might it be compromised? How could people get in? How could people get hold of it? What happens to us? What happens to our company, our nation, our population if we fail to protect it? And how will we react or respond and then move on? What do we do if it does get attacked? What if we do if one of our things fail? How are we going to handle that? That is all of threat modeling in a nutshell. It's asking those questions, going through in a systematic way, figuring out what you're going to do. Now, threat modeling, there's plenty of ways to do it. We're going to talk about a book towards the end by a guy named Adam Shostak, who's written really the Bible on this. He's put it into what he calls a 4-question frame, which is his 4 questions. It's very similar. And it has all sorts of methodologies and ways to do it. My suggestion to you, especially if you're here listening to me talk about it, you're probably just getting involved in threat modeling, start with back of the napkin. Start with the easiest, simplest, most informal way you can do this. Just sit down with a couple people and talk it through. Sit down, developers, business users, over lunch, buy a couple pizzas, whatever the case is, and just talk it through and try to do this back of the napkin threat modeling. And again, we're going to come up with some ways to be a little bit more organized about it. But you don't need to have a third-party security expert team come in, do interviews, really dig into all of this and come up with some really formal proposals, some formal analysis to get value out of it. There's certainly a lot of value in doing it that way. But most of us would really benefit just from doing this type of thing on our own. In fact, we do threat models and risk analysis all the time in our daily life. When we go to cross a street, there are a ton of questions that go through our mind before we step off the curb. Are there cars coming? Is it a two-way road? Is it a busy road? Trucks and big cars, bicyclists, people walking. What do I have to look for? What's the risk? If it's just people walking on a street, it's very seldom occupied by cars. Cars move very slow when they're moving through it. I'm probably a lot more lackadaisical about analyzing the threat coming at me. I'm probably just, I'll look both ways kind of as I'm stepping out and see if anything catches my eye. If this is a major highway, you know I'm paying a lot more attention to it before I go out because the penalty, the risk, is a lot higher. The impact of something happening is a lot higher, and the likelihood of something happening to me, something adverse happening to me, is a lot higher. All right. Adam Shostak, he wrote this book. He put the questions. I gave you my questions. What are we protecting? Why are we protecting it? How might it be compromised? What happens if we fail to protect it? How will we react, respond, and move on? Adam's questions, his 4-question frame is a little bit different. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? Okay? Very similar types of questions, right? Whichever ones resonate, take them, right? Adam has certainly thought a lot more about this than I have, right? You're trying to figure out what's it worth to you. That last question is important. Did we do a good job? Anybody want to take a guess at how you could break into this place? It's a keypad, right? We're not talking Cheeto level security. This is the big time. Right? So implementation matters, right? As does maintenance, taking care of it, looking at it, right? It's pretty easy to figure out how you might get into this place. right? And places can be deceiving. The first picture we looked at was a wooden Mott and Bailey castle. Very easy to put up, very easy to set up, pretty easy to attack, but effective. If you needed to come up with some protection quick, you can set it up, and it's there. This is technically also a Mott and Bailey. Okay? Obviously, a lot more effort went into it. Maybe it's not a lot more functional, though. There's not a whole lot of empty space in there. But whoever was trying to protect whatever goes inside there, they were a lot more serious about it than the people who put up the wooden structures. Okay. Look at this, and let's do another brainstorming, right? What are some of the features of this castle that make it easier to defend, or what features are there that are helping us protect it? Terrain, right? It's on top of a hill. It does not look like an easy approach. What else? Walls, right? Even if you get over the rocks and everything, you still have walls to deal with, and while you're coming up to the walls, presumably we could have people in there firing down. That's our mitigation for people attacking the walls, is put someone on top, throwing stuff down, shooting arrows down, that type of thing. Anything else? Elevation. If you're in the castle and an overwhelming force is deciding to come and take your castle, how are you going to know about it? You're going to look down. You're going to see them coming. You're on the top of a hill. Pretty hard to get there without being able to see somebody, without seeing them come at you, right? They'd have to sneak up on you at night. They'd have to organize it. The logistics would be really tough. Pretty safe to be up there. Similar, another castle. This was a Crusader castle in Syria. Same type of idea. It's hard to see, but over on the left-hand side of this picture, you can kind of see a plain. This is at the top of a plateau. It's very steep getting up there, and you can see for many, many miles around. No one's sneaking up on this, right? And if they're coming up, it's a long, hard climb. No one's rushing up this at high speed, trying to get in. Even modern day, it would be tough to attack from the ground, right? Again, this one's kind of tough. There's really only one easy approach, which is the road coming in and out. That's pretty easy to protect. So, just thinking like an attacker, we protect that road. We're completely 100% foolproof safe, right? You can come down from above. You could attack balloons, hang gliders, whatever. Anybody see the James Bond film, For Your Eyes Only? This is not the monastery that was in it, but this picture is taken from the monastery in For Your Eyes Only of this one. There's a couple monasteries around in these. They're almost impenetrable. They're not really convenient to try to live in for a long period of time because it's hard to get supplies up and there's only one road in and out, that type of thing. If you were trying to attack this, what might you do knowing that there's only one road in and out? Destroy the road, take over the road, right? This is bombing bridges in wartime, right? Yeah, it doesn't help you, but it certainly helps them. And if you're prepared for it, maybe you're in better shape, right? Looking at what the risks are, figuring out different mitigations. All right. So we've been through a bunch of different castles here. Hills, near water, wood, stone, lots of space in them, no space in them, plenty of space for people, not much space for people. We see the same types of things coming up time after time, right? So logically, the idea would be, let's just figure out what the most popular ways of attacking are, right? Let's say we came up with maybe 10 most popular ways, put them in order of likelihood, the top 10 ordered ways of attacking strong places, right? Or we call it an OWASP top 10. If we just protected those, would we be safe? Is that enough? It's safer, maybe. That's really the answer. It depends. The traditional answer for all engineering questions ever, right? It depends. And that's why we do threat modeling. Those top 10, are certainly worth looking at. If I'm building a castle, we've come up with the most popular ways of attacking it already, right? We could take care of the low-hanging fruit on just about any of those castles, even though, and I'm making an assumption here, none of us really have any strong background in medieval architecture, okay? But would it really make it safe? It depends. We need to look further. We need to consider more, okay? This one's different, right? What's really different about this particular castle? It's on the water. This isn't just a moat around it. This isn't, we have water nearby. This looks like there's a bridge in, but for the most part, you're actually in the water, right? Means you're going to deal with things differently. Your risks are going to be different. The impact of those risks is going to be different. There's lots of different ways to look at these charts, but effectively what we're coming up with whenever we start doing any sort of risk analysis is a chart something like this. And it doesn't have to have these same labels. It doesn't have to be 5 by 5. It could be 2 by 2. It could be 3 by 4, whatever. They'll call it risk versus likelihood, severity versus likelihood, impact versus likelihood. They're just two ways to look at this, right? What's the chances of something like this happening? And if it does happen, what's the impact to us, right? This is going to help us decide, where do I want to put my effort? How much time, how many resources, how much money, people, effort am I going to spend to protect against this situation happening, right? Or do I just not care, right? Is this something that, quote unquote, never ever could happen, which, as everyone knows, pretty much is a guarantee that it's going to happen at some point? Or is it just like the impact's insignificant? Yes, we shouldn't let them in there, but who cares? It doesn't really hurt us that much, right? And more importantly, we've got other things we have to consider, right? The stuff in red, far more important for us to deal with. And this red-green, this may not be a representation of the way it is in your environment, right? Maybe there's a lot of it red and very little of it that we can say, hey, this doesn't matter to us. Or maybe almost all of it doesn't matter to us. Or maybe almost all of it doesn't matter to us right now, and we really only care about that upper right corner, right? But whatever it is, we want to use some sort of analysis like this, even just back of the napkin, to figure out, how are we going to deal with this? Is it worth putting effort into it? How much time are we going to spend right now to deal with this? What order are we going to take in how we address things, right? And again, this is why I say, yes, it's great to have professionals come in and do this, but the reality is most of us could sit down over lunch and brainstorm and come up with a bunch of ideas and figure out the most important things for us to deal with right now, and then take another look at it a couple months down the road and say, what do we have to deal with now? What are the risks? How are things changed? What's more important to us? Okay? A lot of what we're talking about is how do we prevent something from happening, and if it does happen, how do we deal with it? Sometimes it's not just about keeping things from happening at all, right? Great Wall of China, does it keep people out? Not really, right? It's thousands of miles long. Even at the height of the empire, there was no way they had every guard post manned, people looking at every spot. There's no place to sneak in, right? Plus, it turns out, we call it the Great Wall of China. It's actually a lot of different walls. They're not all connected. There are gaps, right? There are places where you can climb through. It's not convenient to climb through those places. None of those are on nice, flat, easy ground, because they did a risk analysis and said, you know what? They have to climb up the side of a mountain to get through between these pieces of the wall. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Not too worried about it. And all I really want is, if they get to the wall, I want to slow them down long enough for me to bring forces to bear to attack back, to defend myself. Okay. The way I look at that is a lot like this. Some of you that maybe a little bit older remember the club, right? The idea was it was a big steel club that just locked to your steering wheel and made it really, really hard to drive because you had this big, long pole. Okay? Didn't stop anybody from stealing your car. But somebody going through a shopping center's parking lot, seeing this on your car, you know what? Unless I really want that particular car, I'm far better off attacking the one next door. And that is truly the state of software security in many cases. If you're a DoD government site holding nuclear secrets, if you're a bank holding financial secrets, if you're a company doing a lot of innovative research that might be worthwhile, have some financial value to attackers, yeah, you're going to be attacked anyway. Nothing you can do about that. You are going to be attacked. You have a very different risk profile and a very different impact if something happens than your generic website, somebody hosting a blog on their favorite TV show, right? But as long as we can keep the people who are just casually driving by, the script kiddies, the people who are just running one script against a whole range of IP addresses looking for anybody who has these known vulnerabilities, hey, we're already better off than those guys. Not keeping out the nation-state attackers. We are keeping out the people who are just coming by looking for opportunity. Okay, so what do we do when we find a threat? When we identify a threat and say it's something we want to deal with? There's a couple options. We can mitigate the threat, make it harder to take advantage of, right? We've talked a lot about that with just the castles. We can eliminate the threat. Now, in software, eliminating the threat a lot of times means getting rid of a feature. Yagni, you ain't going to need it. If it's a feature we don't absolutely require, maybe we can get rid of it and then it's not exposed anymore. It's not a potential point of access. For instance, if I'm writing a typical CRUD type interface to a web application, we probably have some administration that needs to happen, some back end, some stuff that only the people with the admin password are going to go in and do, or an admin role. What if we didn't put that into the same app? What if that was a separate app that only lived on our network? You had to be on the VPN or you had to be physically in the location. It's a very different risk that we're taking, right? People can't use it from outside. We don't have to worry about people out randomly on the internet attacking us. If the problem comes in and we need an admin to fix it and they're not in the office, we have to wait for someone to drive in and deal with it. That's a risk we're taking. Our mitigation is that they're going to drive in, but we've eliminated the risk of someone attacking from the outside. We got rid of a feature, so we don't have to protect it. We could transfer the threat. If the threat is you have a database full of usernames and databases, or you have a database full of users, names, credit card numbers, expiration dates, you have to protect that. But what if you don't do any of the ordering handling? What if you don't deal with the payments? What if you ship that off to somebody else? You've transferred the threat. The threat's still there, right? But if you're dealing with it, Stripe, Apple, Google, they've got teams that do this professionally. I may not have those same resources, same experience, same number of people to watch this stuff going on. Transfer the threat to someone who's better off dealing with it. We'll deal with a very narrow pass-through of I'm going to hand them, hey, make sure they pay for this and give me back a good token that says they did. If I get back that token, my risk is that token somehow gets intercepted, somehow gets faked or whatever, but there's all sorts of mitigations around that with cryptography and everything. I'm just really saying, hey, that's your problem. If I get back this token that says we're good and it checks all our cryptographic checks, hey, I'm happy. And now I've transferred the threat. I don't need to protect it. And the last option, the option we take the most often, is we accept the risk. I'm not worried about that happening. It's either really unlikely, the impact is really low, or some combination of both. I just don't care. It just doesn't matter to me. It may be, it just doesn't matter to me right now. Or, it matters to me, but there's things that matter more and I can only deal with so many things right now. Right? So, in this time through, it's not something I'm worried about. All right. We've talked a lot about castles. We've seen a lot of different ones. A lot of the same things happen here. How would we make this castle a little bit safer? Easier to protect. Get rid of the scrub. There's a lot of bushes. There's a lot of places for people to sneak up to. But clearly, at one point, this was made to have a really, really easy to patrol or easy to view approach to it. It'd be really hard to get up close. Maybe the backside forest could be pushed back some, right? That's one thing. Add a moat, put up a fence, right? I think what they're counting on here is that the hill is enough to slow people down, and the walls are already high enough that they didn't need that. But that certainly could be one possibility. Let's take a look at it from another view. Okay, same castle, right? Take a look at the windows in particular. What do you notice about a bunch of the windows? Some of them are close to the ground. That's not optimal, but they are on the top of a hill, so maybe that was enough. They're very thin, a lot of really narrow ones, other than a couple that look like they were closed off. A lot of them are really narrow, so it'd be hard to shoot in, easy to shoot out, right? They're called arrow slits or archer's windows, right? That makes a lot of sense, but that's not true of all the windows, right? Right in the middle of those that look like they're made to make sure that it's really hard to get through, there's one big window, floor to ceiling, with glass that makes it really easy. Thing is, just because something was true when we built it, doesn't mean it's true now. If you notice on the back side of that, you see the red roof, right, peeking over the top of the wall there. Someone has changed the use of this castle. Right? This is now a residence or a museum, right? They decided, hey, it's not the Middle Ages anymore. We're not worried about an attacking horde. We're more worried about getting some natural light in there, so let's go ahead and put in some real windows so we can get some light inside the house. Okay? Point here is, just because it was true before, the uses changed, what we're doing with it changed, our risks changed. Maybe at this point it just doesn't matter to make it worthwhile to try to protect it from just archers and that type of thing. Okay. A lot of what we've talked relates to something that's very, very popular right now in the government and everywhere for good reason, called zero trust. How many people deal with zero trust? Several. Good. Okay. Zero trust really comes down to just a few ideas. And there's a NIST document that outlines these 6 points, what they call the zero trust assumptions, but they really break down into a couple easy things. And they are, the first three are basically, just because someone's on your network doesn't mean you can trust them, right? A lot of times we say, hey, if you're coming from the inside the company, we can trust you. Zero trust is, yeah, don't rely on that. Just because you're inside doesn't automatically mean you're trustworthy. The next two say, if you're outside, we definitely don't trust you, okay? And in fact, we don't even trust where you are. We can't tell whether you're coming from your home or if you're coming from the local Starbucks, right? We can't tell what network you're coming in on, so we're not going to make any assumptions about it. We're going to make sure that everything we do relies on the fact that that could be anybody. Now, it doesn't just mean that it's always going to be somewhere. We're going to put some mitigations in place, but zero trust relies on just because you're in doesn't mean you're granted access. When you're out, we got to assume there might be some problems. We're going to do everything we could protect against that. And last, we might have to move back and forth between trusted and untrusted pieces. And when there's data or information or credentials coming across, we have to have some process to go back and forth. We have to know what that interface looks like, right? And that's all zero trust is, okay? And it too is a threat model. It's just going through, looking at the risks and the mitigations, the risks and the impacts, and figuring out what do we need to deal with it, knowing that these things could be true, knowing that just because we're inside does not automatically make us safe. The reason it comes up with castles in particular is, for a long time, security around software meant putting up big walls on the outside, putting up that firewall. And what we're realizing is, first of all, it's a lot easier, a lot safer not to rely on that. Second of all, it makes this a lot more flexible, because now I don't need to have these giant walls. I can put this up in the cloud. I can put this anywhere, knowing that, hey, I have to have some sort of password, some sort of credential, some sort of certificate passing back and forth, even between my services, to know that that's not somebody malicious trying to attack me. Okay, how are we doing time? We're almost out. Okay. There is a manifesto for threat modeling. And there's a lot of different pieces. It's a lot like the Agile Manifesto. They wrote it to look kind of like that. But there's two principles that stand out that really remind me of how important it is for us to do this, even as back-of-the-napkin type work. The best use of threat modeling is to improve the security and privacy of a system through early and frequent analysis. Don't just do it once and forget it. It's not a once and done type thing, right? And the threat modeling does not depend on one's innate ability or unique mindset. Everyone can and should do it, okay? Don't wait for the consultant to do it. Anybody can do it. May not be the same level of rigor, might not be the same level of discipline, but it's worth doing. And what I found in the past when we've done this, very informally, we found that we had a system we were building for the government, and it had all sorts of different roles. I think there were like 22 different roles that you could have coming in with government credentials, without government credentials, with government credentials, and you're a privileged member, not a privileged member, you're an admin for behind the scenes, you're not an admin, all sorts of combinations of those. And what we started doing was just every time we went to add a new feature that would impact that at all, add a new capability, we just went through the list of the different roles. What's this role going to do? What happens if some other role tries to do it? How are we going to respond, right? Probably not an attack in those cases. Most of those were just somebody tried to get to a button that they weren't supposed to be able to access. What do we do in most cases? Took away the button, right? Don't give them the option. They could still try to hit the endpoint if they knew where it was, if they'd seen it before, and we just put some check on it, right? But we went through one by one. Each time we did this, every time we added a new feature that might impact it, we just had part of our checklist as we were talking about our stories, saying, hey, let's go through. Who's going to have access? Who's not going to have access? If they have access, what does it look like? If they don't have access, what does it look like? Are there any special cases? And we just went through those. It became very easy to keep up to date. It was frequent. It was iterative, right? It didn't require us to sit down and set aside time for a threat model. It was just something we did at the beginning of every sprint when we were adding stories. It was just part of our talking them out. Okay. The book I was talking about, Threat Modeling, Designing for Security by Adam Shostack. If you're really into this, if you really want to get good at this, get the book, read through it. Lots of different options, lots of different ideas. Adam worked within Microsoft to help with their secure development lifecycle. He was part of evangelizing that. He also was part of developing a tool called OWASP Threat Dragon. A lot of the different techniques that he describes don't require any tools, but there are tools that can help you. If you're looking for something a little formal, you want something to start with, something you're not going to get in trouble for picking, Microsoft has a process called STRIDE. STRIDE's a mnemonic for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. And all it is in the process or in the tool lets you draw out your architecture diagram, identify what each piece is, and it comes up with a checklist and says, hey, this piece, because you have this piece talking to that piece, you're going to need to worry about spoofing in between. How are you going to deal with that? And it's just a checklist, and it just picks which ones of these matter at each boundary, at each resource, and just makes it easy for you to go through in a methodical way and make sure you've covered all these processes. So it is a tool. It was originally based on Visio. Now it's not. It's open source, or at least it's freely available. There are plenty of other options. Stride's just a good one because it's popular and it's been proven. If you don't like Microsoft products, there's another one called OWASP Threat Dragon. Same idea. Adam Shostack did write this one based on his time at Microsoft, so very, very similar. And there's other ones, Pasta, Keras, Threadgill, that are all just, Pasta and Keras are different processes. Threadgill is just one I put in there because a bunch of people really bent out of shape because they hate the name. And then Threat Modeler is actually a commercial site, but one of the things they have is a library of pre-done threat models for different kind of architecture patterns. So you could grab something from there Those are free after registration and used as a starting point to kind of see what types of things you should come up with when you want to move beyond back of the napkin type planning. All right, some key takeaways here. Brainstorm your attacks and defenses. Figure out what you're protecting. Balance your resources and time, because you don't have time to put vault doors on everything, and it probably isn't the right answer, but on the other hand, you don't want Cheeto level security everywhere either, most likely. Everyone can and should threat model, and iterate. Early and frequent analysis, right? Do this all the time. Just make it a regular part, something you do once a quarter, something you do once a month, something you do at every sprint view. I don't know, something that you could put even just a few minutes into it regularly and keep getting incrementally better. Okay? Some ways to get good at it, to get started, just threat model something that doesn't matter, like castles, or what are you going to do in the case of a zombie apocalypse, right? Who you have to make sure you run faster than. You don't need to outrun all the zombies, but there's bound to be some coworker. As long as you can outrun them, you're safe, right? Or zombies aren't your thing, maybe you do as an alien invasion, right? Grab a pizza, sit down, and just talk it through. It's easy to come up with those ideas when we're not trying to think of how to apply it to software, but the same mechanisms work, and you'll find that even just going through the through the exercise of doing something with a ridiculous scenario gets you into the mindset of what's the worst that can happen? What am I afraid of? What happens if that comes to pass? How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to try to prevent it? That's really all threat modeling is. Thank you very much. Any questions? I explained it perfectly. All right. Thank you. Anybody who does have some questions, want to come talk to me, feel free. I will be around for the rest of the day, although there's not much rest of the day left. But thank you for sitting through.